The factory's silence isn't empty. It's a living thing, thick with the scent of wet rust and stagnant oil, pressing against my eardrums like a physical weight. My footfalls on the corroded grates echo too loudly. Flank, scrape, clank. Each step a hammer blow against the oppressive quiet. Outside, the Caribbean storm muffles the city. But here, in this subterranean labyrinth of forgotten machinery, the only sound is the relentless sifter scrape, 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 from the darkened tunnels ahead. It syncs with my pulse, a guttural counterpoint in my skull. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like metal dragging over concrete, but deeper. Older, I press my back against cold, damp wall, the rough texture of salt-crusted concrete biting through my thin shirt. My fingers trace the crumbling mortar, seeking purchase, seeking distraction. The air tastes of brine and decay, thick enough to choke on. I see iridescent coral streaks in the grime on the pipes above, deep-sea green shadows clinging to the ceiling like drowned seaweed. Then I feel it, a vibration beneath my palm, not from the wall, but from the key. Wedged tight in a fissure, brass tarnished to a sickly green patina, its teeth jagged. I pull it free. Cold seeps into my skin, sharper than the damp. The scraping sound intensifies, scraping louder now, matching the frantic hammering inside my chest. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It's not random, it's mimicking me. My breath hitches, a ragged sound swallowed by the fog, 15-fiffish. With this is real. It has to be. I hold the key up. The tarnish catches the weak, green-tinged light filtering through a broken skylight high above. The brass seems to pulse faintly, a low thrumming in my bones that matches the scraping. The sound isn't just outside anymore, it's inside my head, a metallic growl resonating with every beat of my heart. I press the key's cold edge against my palm, a tiny sharp sting. Blood beads. I'm too focused on the sound, the way it twin-singsy with my pulse. Scrape, 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 scrape. It's a language, a warning, a countdown. Shadows coil in the periphery, thick as smoke, shifting with the rhythm. Pipes drip somewhere. Drip, drip, drip. But the scraping drowns it out, a constant, grinding counterpoint. I'm not just hearing it, I'm feeling it in my teeth, a vibration that makes the molars in my jaw ache. The key's label, etched in fading ink, reads subterranean. The heart of the deep, my fingers tremble. The scraping stops abruptly, utterly. The silence that crashes down is heavier than the fog outside. It's a physical thing pressing in, suffocating. The storm's distant thunder feels miles away. I hold my breath, the key cold and heavy in my hand. The only sound is the frantic, ragged rush of my own blood in my ears. Then, a single drop falling. From the ceiling, from a broken pipe, or maybe just from the dripping wall. It hits the concrete floor with a tiny, perfect twin plink. A sound so small, so ordinary, it shatters the silence like glass. And then nothing, not even the echo. Just the deep, suffocating silence of the factory, the city, the world, holding its breath. I stand frozen, the key a dead weight, the silence a living thing wrapping around my throat. The scraping is gone. The silence is everything, and I am very, very alone. Silence. The keys lay scattered on the concrete slab, a brass constellation against the grime. Chapel of Whisper Send. Sepal of Whisper Tosi debasement of echoes. The names swam in my vision, twisting the already impossible angles of this place. My mind, a frantic cartographer, tried to reconcile them with the factory's layout, but the maps fractured, dissolving into illogical geometries. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Yet here they were, etched into cold metal, mocking my attempts at reason. The pipes groaned, a low, guttural lament, and I swore I heard syllables within the sound, whispered names carried on the stagnant air. Isabella, Silas, and my pulse quickened. Delusion. It had to be. I picked up the key labeled for dormitory. The brass felt slick beneath my fingertips, the tarnish clinging like a film of sweat. My gaze drifted to the crate tucked into the corner, half hidden by shadows. Inside, nestled amongst straw and dust, sat the container. A small, tarnished silver box, its lid secured with a delicate clasp, the molars. I hadn't touched it. Not consciously, but the vibration. A faint tremor ran through the silver, a subtle hum that resonated in my bones. It was barely perceptible, a phantom touch against my skin. My breath hitched. I didn't move it. The thought formed in my mind, a desperate plea against the rising tide of something. The vibration intensified, a discordant hum that seemed to pluck at the very fabric of the silence. It felt like a plucked guitar string, a brittle, unsettling note in the factory's mournful song. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of rust and something else, something faintly sweet like decaying fruit. I forced myself to analyze it. The keys, the container, the vibration. It was all logical. A trick of the light, a resonance of the pipes, a phantom sensation born of exhaustion. And what? The memory of the argument, sharp and bitter, flashed in my mind. Her voice accusing, relentless. "You're losing it, Owen." A lie. It had to be. The vibration spiked, a jolt that sent a tremor through my arm, making the key clatter against the concrete. The sound echoed, amplified in the oppressive silence. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the sensation away. Falsehoods trigger it. That was the pattern. The container responded to deception. But whose deception? Mine? Or... I opened my eyes, the factory's gloom pressing in. The pipes groaned again. A drawn-out, mournful wail. Screech. The pitch shifted, rising and falling in a discordant, almost mocking tone. The sound felt deliberate, as if the factory itself were responding to my thoughts, amplifying my anxieties, feeding my paranoia. The air grew colder, a damp chill that seeped into my bones. I could feel the sweat beading on my forehead, tracing a cold path down my temples. The smell of decay intensified, clinging to the back of my throat. I looked at the keys again. They were just old factory keys, scattered by past workers, lost and forgotten. Nothing more. My mind was creating connections where none existed, weaving a tapestry of delusion from the threads of isolation and guilt. The container remained still. The vibration was gone. The screeching ceased. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. It wasn't the absence of sound, but a palpable presence, a weight pressing down on me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare by the factory's silent scrutiny. The memory of the argument returned, sharper than before, her face etched with disappointment and something else. Fear, pity. The thought twisted in my gut. The silence held, unbroken. The keys lay still on the concrete. The container remained inert. The factory groaned, a low, mournful sigh, and I was very, very alone. The coral fog. It wasn't a gradual accumulation, not the slow creep of condensation I'd been attributing to the factory's antiquated climate control. This was an intrusion. It bled from the ventilation shafts, a sickly, iridescent bloom against the grime-coated metal. The color itself felt wrong, a mockery of life thriving in this tomb. Deep-sea green at the edges, bleeding into a bruised, unsettling coral at its heart. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a refraction of the meager illumination filtering from above. My mind, ever the cartographer, desperately sought a logical explanation, a geological anomaly, anything to anchor myself to reality. The cat, it was there, waiting, not pacing, not restless, but utterly still, a statue carved from shadow. Its eyes, they shifted. Deep-sea green, then a violet so bruised it felt like a physical ache. It stared, unblinking, a silent accusation. Heister. It's a trick of the light. I repeated a mantra against the rising tide of something. The factory's groan, a familiar lament, seemed to deepen, resonating with the unsettling color of the fog's screech. A faint tremor ran through the floor, vibrating up through my boots. My hand moved before my will could register it. Drawn to the container, I hadn't intended to touch it. The memory of the argument, the accusation, clawed at my composure. "You're losing it, Owen." A phantom echo of her voice laced with a pity I couldn't bear. I had to prove her wrong. I had to demonstrate that this wasn't madness, but observation, analysis. The silver box vibrated violently in my hand, a frantic pulse against my skin. I said I'd never lie about this place. The words were a desperate plea, a reflexive denial. The vibration intensified, a discordant hum that threatened to shatter the silence. It felt like a swarm of insects trapped within the metal, their wings beating a frantic rhythm. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of rust and that sickly sweet decay. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the factory's mournful sighs. The cat's eyes flared, the violet deepening to a bruised, almost black hue. It wasn't a reflection of the coral fog. It was an intensification, a mirroring of something within me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable cascade of delusion. A phantom touch against my cheek, the imagined weight of her disappointment. Falsehoods trigger it. Faux, the pattern. The container responded to deception. But whose deception? Mine? Or the growl? It began low, a guttural rumble emanating from the closet across the chamber. It wasn't the familiar groan of the pipes, this was organic. A predatory sound laced with a primal menace. "It's the factory," I insisted. My voice a strained whisper. "Just the factory." I focused on the texture of the concrete floor beneath my feet, the rough grit against the soles of my boots. I catalogued the rust patterns on the ventilation shafts, the precise shade of decay clinging to the metal. Anything to anchor myself to the tangible. The growl stopped, abruptly. As if silenced by an unseen hand, the sudden absence of the sound was more unsettling than its presence. The air hung thick and heavy, pregnant with an unspoken threat. The container vibrated less intensely, the hum receding to a barely perceptible tremor. The cat's eyes returned to their initial, unsettling shift deep sea green to bruised violet. Then, the fog dissolved instantly, vanishing as if it had never been, leaving behind only the oppressive gloom of the factory. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. I stood frozen, my hand still gripping the container, my mind reeling, the growl, the fog, the cat's eyes. It was all a hallucination, a product of exhaustion, isolation, and the creeping tendrils of doubt. My gaze drifted to the closet. The door, previously closed, now stood slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness beckoned. I took a hesitant step forward, the sound of my boots echoing in the sudden, amplified silence. The metallic rasp of my breath felt intrusive, a violation of the stillness. I pushed the door open wider, empty. The closet was empty. No growling creature. No source for the unsettling sound. Just the musty smell of dust and decay. And the lingering echo of a silence that felt deliberate. The container's weight in my palm was a false comfort. I needed to prove it. Prove them. Wrong that this wasn't madness, wasn't the slow unraveling of reason. The coral fog still clung to the edges of my vision, a lingering stain, but the air had thinned, sharpened. I could breathe again, Fudern. Good. Logic. This is logic. I licked my lips, the taste of rust, and something older, something buried, lingering. The cat's presence was a pressure against my ankle, a deliberate nudge, not the brush of coincidence. Its fur was warm, unnaturally so, a heat that didn't belong in this tomb. The molars in the container pulsed, a slow, deliberate throb, as if in response. I swallowed hard. No, not now. This fog isn't real, I said, my voice steady, measured. The words hung in the air, a lie given form. The container shuddered, not a vibration, an earthquake in miniature, a violent tremble that sent a ripple through my fingers. The sound of metal against concrete scraped in reply, a low, dragging groan from the tunnels beyond the chamber. My breath hitched. The fog consumed my words, but not as I'd imagined. No, it wasn't some malevolent force-swallowing sound. It was the ventilation, the factory exhaling cold air, the rusted ducts groaning as they pushed it through the grime. Choked passages. The scraping continued, a slow, rhythmic scrape, 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 like a blade being dragged across stone. I exhaled, forcing my shoulders to relax. Cold air, ventilation. Nothing more. The molars settled, their vibration diminishing to a low, steady hum. The cat's tail twitched, a single, deliberate flick. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. I crouched, my fingers tracing the cat's spine. Its fur was thick, almost oily, and the moment my skin touched it, the container's hum sharpened. A warning, a response. The scraping sound accelerated. The scrape, 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 becoming a frantic, metallic stutter. Closer now, moving toward me from the tunnels. My pulse hammered in my throat. Falsehoods. Falsehoods. The molars didn't react to lies. They reacted to Futimimi lies. The admission that I was alone wasn't a lie. It was a truth I couldn't afford to voice. The cat's eyes flared, violet bleeding into black, and I flinched. The scraping sound was a living thing now, a frantic, desperate, sick scrape, 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 that filled the chamber, vibrating through the concrete beneath my knees. The container pulsed in my grip, a frantic heartbeat. I had to say it. I had to say admit. I'm alone, I whispered. The molars screamed. The vibration was a physical force, a shockwave that sent a jolt through my bones. The scraping sound became a cacophony, a chorus of metal against concrete, a frantic, dissonant symphony. The cat's body tensed beneath my hands, its back arching as if struck. The fog, no. The cold air rushed in, a sudden gust that carried the scent of rust and something older, something wrong. Then, silence. Not the absence of sound. The absence of signed everything. The molars stilled. The scraping stopped. The cat's eyes returned to their unsettling shift, deep sea green to violet, then back again. The closet door, still ajar, exhaled a single metallic click-click-click. I didn't move. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, a physical weight against my chest. The click had echoed, a single deliberate note in the void. The cat's tail brushed my wrist, a faint, insistent pressure. The container was warm now, almost burning against my skin, And then the closet door began to close. The whispers slithered through the ducts like smoke through a crack. Help! Here, soft, broken, just beyond the reach of my fingers. The cat's weight against my shin was a tether, the only anchor in this labyrinth of iron and rust. I followed the sound, my boots pressing into the grime, the soles slick with something damp, something older than the factory. The air tasted of salt and corroded wire, the ventilation groaning as it pushed the fog through the narrow passages. My breath fogged in front of my face, not from the cold but from the funwrongness of it, thick, clinging, as if the factory itself was exhaling its last breath. The whispers coiled around my ears, a whispery whoosh that dissolved the moment I turned toward them. The cat's tail lashed, a whip of unnatural heat against my calf. No, not now. The molars in my pocket pulsed, a dull throb against my thigh, warning me. I clenched my fist. Falsehoods. Warn. The keys weren't a map, they were evidence. Proof of the factory's rot, the way the support beams sagged, the way the floorboards groaned under weight. Nothing more. But the cat's eyes, deep sea green bleeding into violet, then to something darker, something like a bruise, stared up at me, unblinking. I crouched, pressing my palm to the concrete. The surface was slick with condensation, the cold seeping into my bones. The whispers slithered again. Help! Here, closer now, but not from the ducts. From the walls, from the hoddy air itself. The cat's fur bristled, a living thing beneath my fingers, and the molars in my pocket fibrated a sharp, metallic fighting, like a tuning fork struck. Falsehood, the words stuck in my throat. The keys weren't a map, they were nothing. The cat moved first, slipping through the narrow gap between the pipes, its body a shadow in the coral-tinged fog. I followed, my fingers tracing the rusted edges of the ductwork, the metal groaning beneath my touch. The whispers wrapped around me, a chorus of voices, but not human, one not entirely. The sound of my boots scuffing against the concrete was swallowed whole, as if the fog had teeth. The cat paused at a rusted door, its paw pressing against the cold metal. The whispers stopped. The molars stilled. The only sound was the foin click of the cat's claws against the door, a sharp, deliberate twin click. Click, click, I swallowed hard. The door was unremarkable, just another panel in the endless maze, but the cat's eyes burned into me, violet and bruised dark. Waiting. I reached out, my fingers brushing the metal. It was colder than the rest, colder than it should have been, as if the door had been sealed for years. The whispers returned, a faint sish, but not from the ducts. From behind the door. Help, here. The cat's tail flicked, a single, insistent motion. I exhaled, forcing my hand forward. The door was smooth, unyielding, but beneath my palm. I felt it, a faint vibration, a whisper of movement. The molars in my pocket pulsed a warning. Falsehood. The keys weren't a map, they were nothing. But the cat's eyes, bruised dark, unblinking, stared up at me, and I whispered the words anyway. The keys are a map. Foo, the molars screamed. The vibration was a physical force, a shockwave that sent a jolt through my bones. The door shuddered, the metal groaning like a living thing. The cat's body tensed, its back arching, but it didn't move. The whispers stopped. The fog swallowed the sound of my breath, of my heartbeat, of fund everything, and then the cat's paw pressed against the door. A single fuddick. The door swung open inside. The air was still, no fog, no whispers. Just the faint, iridescent glow of a maintenance log. Its pages yellowed with time, the ink faded but legible. The cat's eyes shifted back to green, the bruise darkening at the edges, and it turned to me, waiting. The log was open to the last entry. Help. Here. The log's pages were not paper, but something thinner, brittle, like the skin of a dried fish, iridescent coral veins pulsing faintly beneath the surface. My fingers hovered above the ink, the air between them shimmering with the same unnatural glow. The cat's breath was a warm, damp foo-hoof against my wrist, its body coiled tight, a spring ready to uncoil. The molars in my pocket pulsed in time with my heartbeat, a metallic furum thrum, syncopated with the blood rushing in my ears. Falsehood. Asterisk, the words clawed at my throat, but I swallowed them down. The first entry was dated in a hand that trembled, Subject 7, Sound Absorption Experiment. Asterisk, the ink was smudged, as if the writer had pressed too hard, too desperate. The words blurred together, the fufadiva subject bleeding into the fufadikavifif absorption, a wound that would close. My thumb traced the line, the texture of the page rough against my skin, like sandpaper worn thin by time. The molar safety screamed, a high, keening wail that vibrated through my ribs, my teeth, the bones of my skull. I clenched my jaw. Falsehood. Asterisk, the keys weren't Tita map, they were 7-0. Asterisk, the cat's tail twitched, a single deliberate flick against my calf. The next line was clearer, survive residual fog. Stable. Asterisk, the words hung in the air, suspended in the coral. Tinged glow. My breath hitched. The fog wasn't alive. It wasn't twine hungry. Asterisk, it was a side effect. A failure. The molars stilled, the metallic fifthrum fading to a dull, aching fifthrum. My fingers traced the margin of the page, the edge frayed as if something had been torn out. The cat's eyes, sickly yellow now. The green and violet bled into something rotten, something like old bruises left too long in the sun, locked onto mine. Help. Here. Asterisk, the whisper wasn't heat in the air. It was in the log, in the ink. In the way the words curled, the way the letters frin-breathed died. I exhaled, slow and steady, the sound swallowed by the fog that had somehow seeped into the room, clinging to the edges of the log like a second skin. The molars pulsed again. A warning falsehood. Asterisk, the cat's body tensed, its muscles rigid beneath my touch. I forced myself to read the final entry, the one the cat had been waiting for. The ink was fresh here, the letters sharp and clean, as if written yesterday. Asterisk, subject 7 is unstable. Containment required. Asterisk, the words glowed, a sickly yellow light seeping from the page, spreading across the log like a stain. The molar screamed again, a physical force that sent a jolt through my skull, my vision swimming. The cat's body arched, its back a bowstring pulled too tight, the sickly yellow of its eyes bleeding into something darker, something like the fog itself. The log's glow pulsed in time with the molars, a slow, rhythmic throb, throb, like a heartbeat. The air in the room thickened, the fog pressing in around us, the sound of my breath swallowed whole. The molars vibrated against my thigh, a metallic fitting, ting, ting, ting syncopated with the pulse of the log. Glow, the cat's tail lashed, a whip of fur against my leg, the heat of its body seeping into my skin, falsehood. Asterisk, the words clawed at my throat, but I forced them out anyway. Asterisk, I've been alone. Asterisk, the molars screamed. The vibration was a physical force, a shockwave that sent a jolt through my bones, my teeth, the very marrow of my skull. The log's glow flared, a blinding yellow light that filled the room, the fog parting like a curtain. The cat's body went rigid, its eyes wide, the sickly yellow bleeding into something darker, something like the fog itself. The words on the log pulsed, the ink writhing like a living thing. Asterisk, subject 7 is unstable, containment required. Asterisk, the glow intensified, the log's pages fluttering like wings, the ink spreading, the words dissolving into the air. The molar screamed again, a high, keening wail that filled the room, the sound of my breath swallowed whole. The cat's body twitched, a single, deliberate motion. The fog pressed in around us, the sound of my breath swallowed whole. The molars vibrated against my thigh, a metallic fitting, ting, syncopated, with the pulse of the log. Glow, the cat's eyes locked onto mine, the sickly yellow bleeding into something darker, something like the fog itself. The log's glow pulsed, the ink writhing like a living thing. Asterisk, subject 7 is unstable, containment required. Asterisk, the words hung in the air, suspended in the coral. Tinged glow. The cat's body tensed, its muscles rigid beneath my touch. The molar screamed again, a physical force that sent a jolt through my skull, my vision swimming. And then, the log's final entry glowed, the ink writhing like a living thing, the words dissolving into the air. The molar screamed one last time, a high, keening wail that filled the room, the sound of my breath swallowed whole. The cat's body went rigid, its eyes wide, the sickly yellow bleeding into something darker, something like the fog itself. The words on the log pulsed, the ink writhing like a living thing. Asterisk, subject 7 is unstable, containment required. Asterisk, the parchment was still warm from the ink, the quill's tremor pressed into its edges like a second heartbeat. My fingers traced the lines I'd drawn. Safe zone, see? I'd called them, though the words tasted like rust. The quartz oscillator's hum was a constant now, a low fouettibre vibrating through the concrete walls, the same frequency the factory had used to deaden the screams of the workers. I exhaled, the fog curling around my breath like smoke. The cat's eyes were coral again, pulsing faintly, as if lit from within. I swallowed. This is how I escape. The lie settled in my throat, thick and metallic. The map before me was a labyrinth, every path looping back on itself, the ink bleeding into the edges like a wound. The keys had led me nowhere, just coordinates, sound dampeners. Sound dampeners. My pulse quickened, the oscillator's hum sharpened, a high footy treach scraping against my teeth. The cat's tail twitched, a slow, deliberate flick against my wrist. The contact was electric, the fur slick against my skin. The hum shifted, rising into a painful resonance of whine, 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 that vibrated through my bones, my vision blurred. It's real. It's all real. The words clawed at my throat, but I forced them down. The map was wrong. The keys were wrong. The cat's eyes flashed, red now, a sickly crimson bleeding into the coral. The oscillator's screech became a thuvy scream, a physical force pressing against my skull. I reached for the molars in my pocket. The metallic thrum was a balm against the pain, a counterpoint to the cat's touch. Falsehood. The word burned in my mind. The cat's claws dug into my wrist, not breaking skin, but digging. The sensation of something burrowing beneath the surface. The ink pulsed, the lines writhing like living things. The oscillator's hum stopped. The silence was worse. My ears rang. The cat's eyes locked onto mine, the red fading into something deeper, something like the fog itself. The parchment crumbled in my hands, the ink dissolving into the air. The last timbre of the oscillator echoed, a ghost in the concrete. And then the cat's eyes flashed red again, a single, deliberate blink. The molars in my pocket twinged. The air tasted like dust and regret. The crumbling parchment dissolved completely now, leaving only the faint scent of iron and decay clinging to my fingertips. The cat, a shifting pool of coral and shadow, pressed against my leg, a silent, insistent guide. I followed, the oscillator as silence a vacuum in my skull, more unsettling than its previous drone. The concrete tunnel narrowed, the walls sweating with condensation. A rhythmic scrape began, a low, persistent friction that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The tunnel opened into a room, not a room really, but a charnel house of forgotten science. Instruments lay scattered across workbenches, their brass and copper surfaces tarnished green. Wires snaked across the floor like metallic vines. A single, bare bulb cast a sickly iridescent glow, painting the scene in shades of deep sea green and sickly coral. The scrape intensified, a mechanical rasp against my teeth. It was coming from everywhere. I moved deeper, my boots crunching on shattered glass. Journals lay piled on a table, their spines cracked and faded. The paper felt brittle beneath my fingers, the ink blurred by time and humidity. I opened one at random. The handwriting was precise, clinical. * experiment log, subject 4. Initial trials successful. Memory suppression achieved. * a chill, colder than the damp air, settled in my bones. Another journal * subject 7. Amnesia induced, full recovery. Witness testimony erased. * my pulse stuttered. I flipped the page, my vision blurring. There it was, my name. Owen Moretti. The cat wound itself around my ankles, a living coil of iridescent fur. Its eyes, a pulsing coral, seemed to bore into me. I am the subject, I thought. The realization a physical blow. The factory wasn't haunted. It wasn't a gateway to some spectral realm. It was a facility, a place of treatment. The keys, they weren't keys at all. They were tools to recalibrate my perception, to reset the dials of my mind. The map, the whispers, the cat, unsettling gaze, all fabricated, all projections of a fractured reality. The scrape morphed, subtly, sickeningly. It wasn't the concrete anymore. It was closer. I followed the sound, drawn to a corner of the room where a single monitor flickered. A waveform pulsed across the screen, a jagged line mirroring the erratic beat of my own heart. The scrape was the sound of that line against the screen, a mechanical echo of my internal rhythm. A low, guttural growl seemed to emanate from the closet in the corner. It was a phantom, a trick of the ear, a symptom. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of disorientation. The room seemed to tilt, the green and coral hues swirling around me. The cat rubbed against the journals, its fur slick against my hand. It felt wrong, too smooth, too deliberate. A memory surfaced, fragmented and distorted. A voice, a scream, a flash of light. The scrape, scrape, scrape resonated with the memory, amplifying its intensity. Another journal, this one bound in worn leather. I opened it, my hands trembling. The handwriting was different, more frantic, more desperate. Asterisk, subject 7 exhibiting unpredictable behavior. Increased paranoia, delusions of persecution. Asterisk, I skipped ahead, my heart pounding against my ribs. The words swam before my eyes. Asterisk, silenced a witness during experiment. Necessary for the continuation of the program. Subject Moretti's condition requires stabilization. Asterisk, the guttural growl from the closet intensified. A low, menacing rumble that vibrated in my chest. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating weight of the truth, but my feet were rooted to the floor, trapped by the insidious logic of the journals, the relentless rhythm of the monitor, the cat's unwavering gaze. The monitor's freakcrit grew louder, drowning out everything else. The cat blinked. A slow, deliberate movement. The guttural growl faded, leaving only the metallic rasp of my own heartbeat against the screen. The journals lay scattered, a testament to, what? My own unraveling. The air hung thick, a miasma of dust and disinfectant. The coral and deep sea green of the room pressed in, a suffocating embrace. I felt a tremor in my hands, a phantom vibration echoing the frantic scrawl in the leather-bound journal, stabilization required. The words felt like a brand against my skin. I needed to move, to break the oppressive stillness. I stumbled toward a far wall, my fingers trailing across the cold, damp concrete. A mirror hung there, cracked and clouded with age. It wasn't a pristine reflection I expected, but a distorted mockery of my own face stared back. The light from the single bulb caught the fissures, splintering my image into 1,000 fractured pieces. It was wrong. The angle of his jaw, the set of his lips, subtly different. He held something. A key. One I didn't recognize. A wave of nausea washed over me, the metallic tang of blood rising in my throat. "You're not real," I said. The words a dry rasp in the silence. The reflection didn't flinch. He simply smiled. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips that sent a jolt of icy dread through my spine. The scrape, scrape, scrape of the monitor seemed to intensify, a rhythmic pulse mirroring the frantic beat of my heart. "You silenced her," he said. His voice wasn't his own. It was mine, but layered with a chilling detachment, a clinical precision that felt alien. The container of molars tucked into my pocket began to vibrate, a low, insistent hum that escalated into a frantic tremor. The sound resonated within my skull, a physical manifestation of the accusation. Silenced her. The memory, suppressed for so long, clawed at the edges of my consciousness. A woman's face, blurred and indistinct, a scream cut short. The cat, a shifting pool of coral and shadow, padded forward, its eyes fixed on the reflection. A low whir emanated from it, almost imperceptible, like the hum of a hidden mechanism. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the green and coral hues swirling into a nauseating vortex. The reflection's smile widened, revealing a glint of something cold and predatory. He raised the key, its teeth glinting in the sickly light. "You know why you're here," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I wanted to deny it, to scream, to fight. But my limbs felt leaden, my voice trapped in my throat. The vibration of the molars reached a fever pitch, a painful thrumming that threatened to shatter my teeth. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for something then, a soft pressure against my leg. The cat. It moved with a deliberate grace, weaving between me and the mirror, a living barrier. Its eyes shifted, the vibrant coral fading to the unsettling depth of the sea. The reflection flickered, momentarily distorted, as if struggling to maintain its form. The scrape, scrape, scrape of the monitor abruptly ceased. The vibration of the molars stopped. The guttural growl, a phantom echo from the closet, returned for a fleeting moment. The fog, which I had convinced myself was a product of the ventilation system, seemed to momentarily coalesce, swirling around the cat's form before dissipating. It was just air, just a trick of the light, just another fabrication of my fractured mind. The cat's eyes glowed brighter, a luminous coral that burned into my soul. The reflection vanished, leaving only the cracked and clouded surface of the mirror. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the frantic hammering of my own heart. "You know why you're here," it echoed in my mind. A chilling pronouncement that stripped away the last vestiges of denial. The weight of understanding settles upon me like a shroud, suffocating in its clarity. I feel the rough texture of the concrete wall behind me, the chill seeping into my bones as I lean against it. The cat's eyes, those glowing orbs of coral and green, seem to bore into my very soul. It isn't a conduit, it is the experiment itself. My mind reels with the implications. The neurological condition that has haunted me for so long was merely a ruse, a veil of confusion designed to obscure the truth. As I gaze upon the cat's serene form, its fur glistening in the faint light like the soft sheen on polished coral, my thoughts unravel at an alarming rate. The sentient fog, those eerie vibrations, all were mere tools, cleverly crafted distractions from the true horror that lurks within me. My fingers brush against the container of molars nestled in my pocket. It vibrates once, a subtle tremor that resonates through my entire being like the soft hum of a harp string, plucked by an unseen hand. The word truth hangs on my lips, whispered into the silence as if to test its validity. The cat's eyes seem to gleam with an otherworldly intelligence, their luminosity casting an ethereal glow across the cold concrete floor, like the soft luminescence of a lantern in the darkness. I feel its gaze upon me, piercing and unyielding, as it sits calmly between me and my reflection in the cracked mirror. The glass seems to ripple with distortions, as if reality itself is warped by the cat's presence, refracting light into tiny prisms that dance across the walls like a mad artist's brushstrokes. In this moment of epiphany, I am acutely aware of the soundscape around me, or rather its gradual dissolution. The quartz oscillator hums softly in the distance, a gentle thrumming that ebbs and flows with an almost soothing cadence, only to fade into silence like the dying embers of a fire. It is as if sound itself is being drained from the world, leaving behind an oppressive stillness that presses upon my eardrums like the weight of a physical force. My thoughts spiral inward, drawn toward the dark abyss within me where memories lie shrouded in mist and shadow. The factory's experiments with sound, it wasn't about erasing memories, but concealing them beneath layers of artificial terror, ensuring I'd never recall my true actions on that fateful night like a thief hiding stolen treasures in a labyrinthine vault. As the silence deepens, becoming almost palpable as the darkness gathers around me like a living entity, my gaze drifts toward the cat once more. Its eyes burn with an inner fire, illuminating paths I'd rather not tread, paths that lead to revelations about myself and what I've done, lit by the faint glow of embers from a long-dead conscience. The molars vibrate again, a single, decisive pulse like the tick of a clock marking time's passage into eternity. It is then that it hits me. She was the witness. The woman whose face has haunted my dreams and waking moments alike, her features indistinct yet unforgettable, as a ghostly apparition forever trapped in my mind. The cat's eyes go dark suddenly, extinguished like candles snuffed out by an unseen hand. In their place is only darkness, profound and unforgiving, the abyss of self-realization staring back at me with cold indifference, its depths yawning open like the mouth of a chasm waiting to swallow me whole. And in that instant, I understand. I silenced her. The words form on my lips without sound, yet they reverberate through every cell of my being, branding themselves into my consciousness as indelibly as acid etching glass. The truth is out. The veil has been lifted, revealing a monster, not in the mirror or in the fog but within myself, its presence now undeniable and inescapable like a shadow cast by a setting sun on a winter's night. The darkness seems to close around me then, enveloping all else as my world contracts into that singular moment of realization. Time itself appears to bend, stretching out this instant of comprehension until it fills every crevice of existence, leaving only the stark truth and its unyielding weight upon my shoulders like a physical burden I must carry for eternity. The cat's form blurs at the edges as tears well up in my eyes, distorting reality further. The room around me dissolves into nothingness. All that remains is this crushing knowledge. Fushi was the witness. I silenced her.